My name is Gavin Boby. Some people refer to me as the Mosque Buster, and it's a title I'm very flattered to receive. In the next 3 videos I'm going to be talking about why I oppose mosques and why you should too. But here I want to ask the question, what is a mosque? Now, the word mosque means place of physical submission. It comes from the Arabic word masjid, which itself comes from the Arabic word sajada, which means physically to prostrate. It's completely different from the Greek word kyriake, which is the root of the word church, meaning the Lord's house. It's also completely different from temple, the Latin root templum, which means ground fit for the taking of auspices, consecrated ground, fit for worship. And when you're talking about physical submission, you're talking about physical power, and then you're talking about the power to coerce, political power, force. And that is borne out by the fact that every mosque is modelled on the original mosque, which was Muhammad's Medina Mosque, which he set up in the 7th century. He hadn't been able to get up his dictatorship in Mecca, so he goes back to Medina and sets up a mosque there and sets up a political power. And that mosque is used, amongst other things, for planning, blessing and directing jihad armies and wars, drawing up contracts, declaring Sharia law, declaring the supremacy of Muslims over non-Muslims, pronouncing death sentences. Now imagine that in a church, pronouncing death sentences. Now all of this matters because Muslims are required to follow the example, the Sunnah, that's where the word Sunni comes from, the Sunnah of Muhammad. Now, after Muhammad had set up his first mosque in Medina, a few years later he goes back to Mecca and conquers it by force. And he stands in front of the Kaaba, that's the big black cube in Mecca, which until then had been the multiculturalist, multi-faith dream with over 300 different deities being worshipped there. He stands in front of the Kaaba in full battle dress and battle helmet and declares that all the Muslims constitute one hand as against all the non-Muslims, unquote. So that tells you, and from then on it becomes a place of Muslim worship alone. So it's no wonder that arms and battle gear have been found in mosques in towns like London and Munich. It's no wonder that multi-faith prayer rooms quickly become Islamic prayer rooms, taken over for Islamic worship, where you'd better be respectful and preferably observe Islamic rituals of worship. A mosque is about power. It is a beachhead in a long, slow, fascistic war where religion takes the place of race. So, what goes on in a mosque? Well, there are 2 studies from America and anecdotal evidence from England. Now, the first American study is called Sharia and Violence in American Mosques. It was carried out by a man called David Yerushalmi, a very impressive American lawyer who took 100 randomly chosen but representative mosques in over 14 states and focused on the books and materials that were made available in them. And he divided these materials into non-violent, moderately violent and severely violent. So that should tell you something right there. And what he found was that 51% of those mosques contained severely violent texts. 30% contained only moderately violent texts, and 19% contained no violent texts. And all the severely violent mosques encouraged worshippers to study violent materials. Over 97% of both severely and moderately violent mosques, over 97%, had materials promoting financial support for terror. 3/4 of mosque goers went to the severely violent mosque. So when it comes to bums on seats, congregants, worshippers, they want the severely violent mosques. A bit over 1/5 went to moderately violent mosques, and 1 in 30, just over 3%, went to the non-violent mosques. That tells you something right there. Now, the second study is from 2005, carried out by Freedom House, called Saudi Publications on Hate Ideology in American Mosques. And that found that 80% of American mosques had materials espousing the establishment of an Islamic State. That was in 2005. 10 years later, look what's happened. Violence and hatred of non-Muslims, Jew-hating, infidel conspiracy theories, jihad ideology, and the suppression of women. Now, all of this isn't because Muslims are born violent. They don't come out of the womb wanting violence. It's because Muslims know how violent, warlike, and on close analysis, genocidal Islamic doctrine is. And when they go to mosque, they want authentic Islamic doctrine. Why else would you go to mosque? They want that old-timey, good old Islam, not the wishy-washy, unreal version that Western politicians dish up for their own self-serving reasons. And that has been borne out anecdotally by a Channel 4 documentary called Undercover Mosque, where some journalists stuck a camera up their jumper, went around the mosques and recorded what words of peace and love were being pronounced in English mosques, and they overheard the following calls to love and harmony. Firstly, quote, "If the Imam wants to crucify the apostate, he should crucify him. The person is put up on the wood and he's left there to bleed to death for 3 days." Right. Secondly, you have to bomb the Indian businesses, and as for the Jews, you kill them physically. And thirdly, here's one for the ladies. Regarding marriage prior to puberty, we know that Prophet Muhammad practiced it. It wasn't abuse or exploitation, it was marriage. So that tells you what was getting said in English mosques. And the British police were so keen to propagate the peaceful and loving nature of Islamic doctrine that they put the documentary makers under investigation, criminal investigation, for having shown us. So that tells you their attitude. Be under no illusion. A mosque is not a place of peace. It is a place to advance physical and political dominance, political power. It is a beachhead in a long fascistic war. And the question for you is, how much are you willing to sacrifice in order to surrender to that?